How can I retire at 60 with $200,000 saved for retirement? That's what we're going to look at today on the Your Financial EKG YouTube channel. I've got a couple. They're both 60 years old. They have $200,000 in combined retirement savings, and they're asking the question, how can I retire? First, let's look at some averages and the medians for retirement savings from 45 to 65 so that you can see we might be retiring with $200,000 if we're among the averages. So let's look at this. Here is the Federal Reserve data, the average retirement savings. So let's look at ages 45 to 65. So ages 45 to 49, the average save for retirement is $148,000. Ages 50 to 54, the average save for retirement is $146,000. From ages 55 to 59, which is where we're going to be, $223,000 saved for retirement. Ages 60 to 64, $221,451. Now that's the averages, and averages are skewed because you've got a lot of large numbers at the top. You've got a lot of little numbers at the bottom. They add all those together, divide that out, and you get an average. But what I want to look at is the median, where they take that same list, they go right to the middle, and that gives a better overall statistical view of America. So let's look at the median save for retirement, because this is probably more in line with where you fall, where your neighbors fall, where your colleagues fall. Now, Americans aged 45 to 54, the median save for retirement is $100,000. Ages 55 to 64, the median is $134,000 saved for retirement. And ages 65 to 74, it's $164,000. So you see, we've got our work cut out for us if we want to retire. So I'm going to do the video today, how can I retire at 60 with $200,000? Now here's what we've got. We got Frank and Karen. Now Frank and Karen both live in Kentucky. They're 60 years old and they want to retire. They want to fully retire. Now they are still working. They're asking the question, how can I retire right now? Now we're going to look at Social Security first. So if we take Social Security at 67 for both of them, Frank's going to get $2,470 a month and Karen would get $2,200. Now obviously we could adjust this. Their full retirement age benefit is $2,470 for Frank, $2,200 for Karen. Now if you take Social Security at 67, you're going to get 100% of your full retirement benefit. If you take it earlier, you're going to get a reduced benefit. So if you take it at 62, you're going to get 70% of your Social Security or your full retirement benefit. If you take it at 70, you're going to get 124% of your overall benefit. So you can see that here. If Frank takes it at 62, his Social Security would be $1,729. If Karen took it at 62, it'd be $1,540. So as we're going through the can I retire scenario, we've got to ask ourselves, does it make sense to take Social Security at 62, 63, 64, 65, or 67? That's one of their main questions is, when do I need to claim Social Security benefits? Now, from a pension standpoint, there are no pensions. They're just regular workers, no pensions in this scenario. From an asset standpoint, we've got basically 4 accounts. We've got 3 TD Ameritrade accounts, of which we help Frank and Karen manage. We've got an IRA at TD Ameritrade for $125,000 under Frank. Karen has a Roth IRA at TD Ameritrade with us of $25,000. Karen has a traditional IRA at TD Ameritrade of $50,000, and they have a joint account in the UK Federal Credit Union of $25,000. So their total assets are $225,000. Now we're going to use $200,000 for retirement, which we're asking the question, can I retire? How can I retire at 60 with $200,000? $25,000, their bank account money, is going to be excluded from this scenario because it's their emergency fund. Again, that's money that we want to use in an emergency, HVAC, roof, car, something that we need quick, easy cash for, and it's the most tax efficient. Doesn't mean it's going to sit in the bank and earn zero. It might be in a CD, might be in a high yield mutual fund, or a high yielding savings account, or a high yield money market account, something like that, that is safe, but it's going to give us some interest. All right. Now, they do have a home. It's worth $350,000 and it's paid off. So they are debt free, which is one of the reasons why they have less in retirement savings, because they put a lot of money towards their mortgage and they wanted to be debt free. Now, the rate of return we're going to run on the investments is 5%. I'm going to use 5% on the investments and 2% on the bank. Now, obviously, the bank could be higher than that, but we're just going to use 5% for the market. And the reason we're going to use 5% is because it's basically half of what the S&P 500 has done since the 1950s. If you add in inflation, the S&P's average about 8. Without inflation, it's 10. So we're going to go to 5 to be really conservative. We don't want to be too overly aggressive in this scenario. And they're really asking the question based on their assets, how much money can they spend? Because when we're doing a financial EKG for someone, and if you want a financial EKG or you want to talk to me, all that information is in the description below. But when we're doing an EKG for someone, we want to find out 2 main questions. Can I retire? And how long is my money going to last, right? Can I retire and will I run out of retirement income? Those are the main 2 questions. And then everything else will fall on the side of that. If we can retire and our money is going to last, what about Social Security? What about inflation? What about long-term care? What about sequence of return risk? How should my investments be allocated? What about everything that's going to give us the best delta, the best rate of return, the best percentage, the best optimal strategy to make our retirement dollars go the farthest? All right. So from an expense standpoint, this is where we've really had to do some work. Now, Frank and Karen live in Kentucky. It's a lower cost state. We've got expenses of $3,000. Okay, and let me show you how this works. We've got baseline expenses of $3,000. Inflation's at 3.27. They don't have any vacation built into this. They don't have any travel. They don't have any extras built into this. This is baseline. They're pretty simple people is what they said. They don't need a whole lot of extra money. So what we're looking at is just baseline expenses. There's no mortgage, so there's nothing built in here for debt. This is just living. And we're going to put inflation on this on a monthly basis, right? Because you understand that inflation's not annualized, it's monthly, right? Why do we look at the Fed every month to see what they're going to do with inflation? It's because it's a monthly thing, not an annual thing, right? Raspberries today are more expensive than they were yesterday, and they'll be more expensive tomorrow. And that's my favorite fruit, raspberries. So $3,000 is their expenses. Now they are asking, can we spend any more and how can we do that? And so that's something that we're going to have to work through in the financial EKG. From a tax standpoint, it's really important for them to understand taxes because a lot of their assets are pre-tax. So if we look at the year 2024 from a tax standpoint, we'll have distributions of $38,181. We'll have a standard deduction of $27,700. So that's taxable income of $10,991. So their federal tax is $1,099. You take that, you divide that into the 10,991, and they've got an effective tax rate of 2.84%. So their bracket is 10%, but their effective tax rate is 2.84. Now, I don't care about their bracket. I could give 2 hoots about what their bracket is. I want to care about what their projected federal effective rate is. And one of the things we're also going to look at is what happens if taxes go up? Because they're going to increase in the year 2026. So what if they go up 25%, which is a reversion back to the Obama era tax code, which is where we would go if the current tax code is not revised or updated, which is not necessarily a bad tax code. But so in 2024, they're at 2.84%. In 2026, they jump actually 2.83. Let's go to 2027. They're at 0. So actually their tax code is not too bad when it comes to running out of money and putting the taxes on top of that. And so now let's look at retirement. They've got $200,000 saved for retirement. How long is their money going to last? Well, the reason they were in a 0 tax bracket is because they out of money. And you can see this. 66 years old, we are out of money. This is not where we want to be. We started with $225 and we're out, right? There's our $3,000 in expenses. Here's Social Security kicking on at 67, but we're out of money. So let's look at this. Let's go back. Let's take Social Security a little earlier. What if we take Social Security at 62? Does that help us at all? So we go back to retirement. Look at that. Now here's something for you to really be thinking about, especially when it comes to claiming Social Security. Let me show you this again. Maybe you missed it. Come closer. Make sure you're paying attention. Let's go to income. Let's go to Social Security. Let's take Social Security at 67. Let's save it at 67. So now they're going to take Social Security at 67. Let's go to retirement. When are they out of money? I didn't hear you. 66. Retire at 60, we're out of money at 66. 6 years. What if we took Social Security early? Let's go back to that. Take Social Security at 62. Remember, we're taking it at 62, it's 70% of our full retirement benefit. So for them, that's $1,729 for Frank, $1,540 for Karen. Go back to retirement. Now wait a sec, we don't run out of money. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that the reason why we want to do a financial EKG? Isn't that reason enough to do a financial EKG to find out when are you going to run out of money? Because to them, they came to me saying, hey, we want to delay Social Security as long as possible. But when we're running the scenario, it doesn't make sense for them to take Social Security as late as possible. It actually makes the most sense for them to take Social Security early. Take it at 62. BJG Wentworth, this is my money and I want it now. Do that because it makes the most sense. And let me show you why. So we've got 2 years of pulling off that $3,000. Now, Social Security kicks in, and we actually have a positive cash flow for 1 year, and then boom, we never run out. We actually grow our assets because Social Security with its COLA is able to keep up with our expenses. So now, now I'm able to go back and Frank and Karen and say, let's talk about that travel you wanted to do. Let's go to expenses. And let's add in, now again, they're not big travelers, so for them, they don't care about going to Paris, France. They care about going to Panama City Beach, Hilton Head, Gulf Shores, Alabama, coming down here to Tampa to visit me. So let's throw some travel in. And what if we throw in, let's say $5,000 a year. Let me grab my calculator real quick. And let's say we do a $5,000 trip a year. That's $416 a month. We're going to leave inflation at 3.27%. Now there's 60, so let's say we do this for 20 years. Just because at 80, let's say they don't want to travel anymore. Okay? So we're going to do 20 years of travel. Now let's go back to retirement. Okay, now look at this. This is going to be a positive thing. Even though there's a red line here that says they're out of money at 91, this is a positive because now we've added in travel. We're going to actually take out more in expenses every month for travel, and we're out of money at 91, which for most people, they'd be like, hey, I'm good. I got to the mid 90s or early 90s. I'm good. Plus, you see this house right here, $479,000 house. They can do a reverse mortgage, which they call a HECM now, a home equity conversion mortgage, or they can sell the house and move into an independent living, assisted living, or with the kids. So we got options here, right? This is actually a really good scenario. And they're like, hey, we can go travel now. Again, another reason why we want to do the financial EKG. Now, here's the thing I want to look at though. We're taking Social Security early, which means we're making the money last for longer. We're going to start traveling a little bit, which is good. Now let's look at taxes again. Does that hurt our taxes taking Social Security early? Now look, let's go to 2026. No, we're actually in the zero tax bracket because and look at our Social Security. Taxable Social Security is at 0. Go to 2027. Taxable Social Security is 0. Remember, Social Security is taxed by what they call the provisional rate. You have a provisional income, and that determines how much of your Social Security is used in the computation of your taxes. And in their case, they don't fall into those brackets. So their gross income is $6,200. So not only are we able to retire at 60 with $200,000, we take Social Security early, and now our taxes are extremely low. So this is a really good scenario for these people that you might have thought in your mind, hey, this is not going to work out very well. They did some poor planning. If they have Social Security at pretty good rates and they only have $200,000 saved, they haven't done very well. But keep in mind, everybody's situation is their own situation. You don't know what your neighbor's gone through. You don't know the money they've had to spend to take care of an elderly parent, or you don't know what they've had to spend on health care for children. You don't know what they've had to go through and where they're at today. So don't judge people by where they're at based on what I'm doing on YouTube. Let's look at it and celebrate. Hey, we've got to retirement. We're going to get through retirement, and we are protecting ourselves, staying in retirement. Now, the last thing I want to look at, which is really important, which is something that I don't necessarily think I'm going to be able to fix for them, but it's something that we need to have conversations about, is long-term care. Long-term care is something that we don't necessarily like to talk about in my world. I don't like talking about morbid issues any more than you do. I don't want to talk about death. Don't want to talk about long-term care. I don't mind talking about taxes, but I don't want to talk about death. And if we look at this, we have an issue. If one of them goes into long-term care, and this is if Frank goes into long-term care, we're out of money pretty quick. Now, obviously, assisted living is about half this cost, and things would adjust in their plan. But long-term care is something they really need to be thinking about, and where their assets are at, because they have less amount of assets that, they're not going to go out and buy a long-term care insurance policy because, one, those are way too expensive, and two, it doesn't make sense. We need to start thinking about designating some assets for long-term care protection, whether that's in the market or outside of the market, because that is something that most people, 2 out of 3 individuals, are going to need some sort of care. Maybe not in a facility, but some sort of care. So that's something we've got to think about. And let's look at the market real quick, and then I'll get you guys out of here. So let's look at the market. Now, what we've got, this is our market scenario. And what we're able to do is take individualized randomized rates of return over here, which is like a Monte Carlo scenario. And then we're able to take what we're doing over here, and we're able to see the difference, just like you would in a Monte Carlo scenario, but it's broken down individually instead of just in like 1,000 different groupings all at once, okay? So in this case, we want to see the negatives first in the market. That's called sequence of return risk. Sequence of return risk is simply that you walk into retirement and the market falls, crashes, stinks, those first few years, right? Think 2000 to 2002. Think 2007 to 2009. Think 2022, and if 2023 is not positive, sequence of return risk, right? Multiple years of a down market, okay? So in this case, we're going to generate 4 years first, and we're going to see what happens to our assets here. Look at this. Based on that, we're out at 82 years old, which our scenarios got us out at 91. That's with, the travel being built in there. Generate it again. Now we've got a little bit less of a burden, but look at this down here. A little tougher. We're out at 80 again. All right, let's throw another randomized rate in there. Let's do 3 for the YouTube. Okay, so it's not too bad here. And we're out at 82. So in their case, sequence of return risk is being very important. Now remember, we're running them at a very, very low rate of return, 3.96%. So I would assume that the market's going to average more than 3.96%. But what the Monte Carlo what the Monte Carlo does for us is it allows us to say, hey, we're going to have to watch this on a quarterly and on an annual basis to make sure that we have your investments aligned correctly, the rate of return that you need to make this money last forever. And that's something that we get only in the EKG. We're able to look at that. People call me all the time and say, what should I be invested in? And I say, I don't know. We got to look at your EKG. Based on that, that's the way we should invest for retirement. Okay, so I hope this has helped. How can I retire at 60 with $200,000? Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.